Oh, Rurikon. Some stuff happened with Dragon Age.
So Jason Schreier once again went out there and did one of his exposés, so to speak, to talk about everything that went down with the development of Dragon Age. And I read that one last night. Somebody was kind enough to like transcribe it somewhere on the internet so that I wouldn't have to give Bloomberg my hard-earned money.
And I sort of pieced it all together by just reading all of the articles
around it.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, I know now what the what the expose is about.
But I read the whole thing, and I gotta be real. This is one of those where I didn't find a whole lot of meat in there. Like there's some stuff that he talked about, which I will get into, but most of the things that were discussed in that article were things that I realized when I saw the first gameplay trailer of the game.
Yeah.
Like literally the first gameplay trailer of the game, and you can go back and you can watch my reaction to it, and you will hear me say some of the things that Jason Schreier says on this expose, which is like, I looked at the gameplay and I was going, oh, so they just grabbed all of those levels that were designed for multiplayer and they retrofitted them to suit a single player thing, because you could tell, because the levels are mostly corridors to arenas. Corridors to arenas. And this is like the typical, level layout for a co-op multiplayer game. Is
looter
like
shooter,
that
magic looter type game.
That type of thing. So you could instantly tell it's like, oh, you just retrofitted these levels and now they're single player, which fine if that's what you want to do. But obviously, it's not going to feel quite the same as a level that was designed from the beginning to be a single-player level. And that's one of the things that gets brought up repeatedly, how the multiplayer scope of things kind of like screwed everything over. But it's also obviously the indecision, because the game started as a single-player project, and then they went and the higher-ups at EA said, actually, this is going to be a multiplayer project, which is what we got announced to us, which was Dreadwolf. And that allowed them to basically reset the whole development of the game and push a bunch of the team. I don't even think this is mentioned in Jason Schreier's article. It was mentioned in some other article in the past, because they pushed a significant portion of the team that was working on that game. I think it
was Dora. It was Mark Dora that revealed that in the past. Yeah.
But basically, those developers that were working on that version of Dragon Age were moved on to go help out with Anthem and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, when you have a situation like that, is that the game's already on rocky floor, and then on top of it, they go and they say, actually, we're going to swap it one more time, and we're going to go this time from multiplayer back to single player. But this time, they weren't allowed to reset the development process, because EA's like, hey, we've had it with your fucking bullshit. Just make the video game. And they're like, well, guess we have to reuse whatever we have to go and sort this out. Now, in between those transitions, what happened is there's this guy called Goldman. He's apparently like the creative director or something. And one of the things that is said in the article is that this Goldman fellow pushed for a pulpy, more lighthearted tone than previous entries, which suited an online game, but was a drastic departure from the dark, dynamic stories that fans loved in the fantasy series. And I think that this is another terrible misconception that people have, is that, oh, if we're doing multiplayer, the story needs to be pulpy and more lighthearted. Is like, brother, look at Night Rain, okay? That story ain't fucking pulpy, okay? Especially if you
I'll leave my opinions till the end, because I have a lot of opinions about all of this.
Yeah, but like with Night Rain, to give you just an idea, there's a character in there that's like, she's a tiny little doll, like a little child doll. And let me tell you, the story of that fucking doll ain't fucking pulpy, bro. It ain't fucking lighthearted. It ain't no goddamn joke. Okay?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to do that just because the game is multiplayer. But no, like a lot of these people, they've either lost their creativity or I don't fucking know. But anyways, some BioWare employees said that they were simply building Anthem with dragons, which should be a big red flag. There were constant leadership changes, which a really interesting thing, and this is something that I brought up during Anthem as well. What this tells me is that the biggest issue that BioWare has is their leadership is ass. They are ass. Because even with Anthem, despite the fact that there are all of these problems and whatnot, the gameplay experience and the game that they were able to put together in 18 fucking months. 18 months they put this shit together, like all of the assets and bullshit that they were like making and reworking. But in 18 months, they crammed that shit down into a workable video game. I was like, that's impressive because it actually runs pretty decently. The gameplay is pretty fun. It's impressive. And Dragon Age, kind of the same thing. It's actually a somewhat well-optimized game when it came out. Like, even most people that played it be like, oh yeah, this actually runs pretty well. And, you know, from a technical standpoint, the game was actually very playable, super, you know, whatever, what you would expect from a video game. But then the actual content of the game is just okay, that's a different conversation altogether. But it's impressive to me that the developers at BioWare actually seem to be the people actually coding the game and the engine and fucking around and doing all that stuff. They actually seem to be quite talented. It's just the people above them, they just keep feeding them shit. It's like, listen, I have this big turd sandwich I'm going to need you to eat. But with all these leadership changes, another thing that was also brought up is that apparently the Dragon Age team and the Mass Effect team, those guys don't get along. And apparently, when the Mass Effect team says something, they get it. And when the Dragon Age team says something, they get the middle finger. It's just like a hilarious thing, but
So I read the article sort of adjacent to, you know, by reading all of the other articles around it. And I fully respect, right, that all of these things were problems and no one's taking anything away from it. What I did find really problematic is that Jason Schreier is supposed to be a journalist, right? He's supposed to come at this from an unbiased perspective and reveal all of the reasons why the game failed. Yet, the woke storylines of the game is not included in his article anywhere. Now, I told you that this is related to the stuff with Paul Tassi. And that's exactly the fight that I had with Paul Tassi the last 2 days. And Paul Tassi got dragged all over X as a result of his insistence that woke has nothing to do with the failures of Star Wars Outlaws, Dragon Age the Veilguard, Star Wars Acolyte, The Rings of Power, The Wheel of Time. You go down the list, every single Star Wars movie after the original 6. You go down the list of all of these films, all of these movies. Dustborn is another game. Forspoken is another game, because that, by the way, what you didn't say, Forspoken's failure was the thing that let Dragon Age sort of go, maybe we shouldn't do the lighthearted stuff. Maybe we should rewrite it into, I don't know, bullshit or whatever, right? So it's this sort of...
Wait, Forspoken's failure had influence in Dragon Age? What? I've never heard this one.
Yeah. In the article, it was mentioned that it was the failure of Forspoken that sort of made the higher-ups go, oh, shit, wait. Maybe this lighthearted stuff isn't working.
Wait, what?
Maybe this lighthearted stuff is really bad.
I didn't read that.
Because Forspoken also... I think it was part of, was it IGN's article that said that, or was it PC Gamer's article that said that? One of the two.
The transcription that I read of Jason Schreier article made no mention whatsoever of Forspoken, unless I was like high when I read it, but...
Yeah, well, go check back, because it is one of those reasons, right? Or it's one of the reasons they decided to do a bunch of rewrites effectively to the game. And this is why the game apparently feels disconnected, because some parts were rewritten because they were afraid of, Forspoken's sort of fate being the game's fate. And so now the game just feels completely out of sorts. The fundamental problem that I have is that you as a journalist cannot even acknowledge that if you have all of these games, right, that continuously fail, and all of them follow sort of the same political bent, right? They all come with the same political activism. That you don't even go, well, maybe players aren't really sort of super excited with this shit. Maybe we should stop pushing this, and maybe that could have had at least some effect on it. No one's saying that the only reason games fail is because of woke political activism, but it is definitely a contributing factor because every single game that goes down the road of woke political activism tends to fail.
I think whoever wrote that article took some severe liberties. Like I just control F'd the transcript of Jason Schreier's article. There's not a single mention of Forspoken.
I covered it yesterday. I covered the article yesterday, and I think it was IGN's article, but it could have been that IGN spoke to people. Right?
I'm just
get clarification from them.
That might have been it. I'm just saying, like on the Jason Schreier article, there's no mention of that whatsoever.
Yeah. I read it, and I was immediately like, yeah.
It's like we've had this discussion multiple times throughout the podcast. I don't want to like relitigate it, but the whole thing with the woke storylines is not the biggest problem with Dragon Age.
It doesn't have to be the biggest.
Yeah, I know, because
right? So here's the thing.
I know what your argument is. The whole thing about but woke led to hiring bad people. Blah blah blah. I get it.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree.
It's not just that.
Yeah.
No, but it's not just that, right? You can't. Well, the problem is someone has to explain to me why every single game that is left-wing political activism fails. Because it seems like every single one of these series, every single one of these movies, every single one of these games fail. And there's always some big reason for it. Oh, the executives were ruining the game and it was the suits or they didn't have enough time. But every single one of these games, like, I don't understand that. And then you have games like Palworld, you have games like Helldivers, you have games like Baldur's Gate 3, where famously the creator of Baldur's Gate 3 said they weren't preaching to players. They didn't put politics above gameplay, right? Famously, the creator of Baldur's Gate says, we're just making video games here, bro. We don't give a shit about preaching to players. Because he even realizes that that's a big problem in the gaming industry. And the media knows it because the original articles that covered his speech completely left out the part about politics because they didn't want the inconvenient truth that politics ruin video games.
And Jeff,
so someone has to explain to me why every single one of these left-wing activist woke video games continuously fail. And I get that there's multiple reasons for it, but it's sort of weird that all of them also happen to be mega woke and continuously fail as a result of that. And then the other thing that bothers me is we all just sort of take Jason Schreier's sort of word on the blaming of the executives. So here's my question. Why would the suits of EA constantly replace people if the project is going well? Like if the project is continuing at pace,
they're not replacing.
Everyone's
people.
doing their jobs.
They're not replacing people. People are quitting. Like what's his name? The main guy behind
Mark Dara.
No, Corey Hudson. He quit, and there was another guy that also quit.
So it's not Casey Hudson.
Yeah, Casey Hudson. Yeah,
the guy from Mass Effect.
Yeah. So he quit at some point midway through the project, and somebody else that was like a higher up. I don't know if it was Mark Dara. It might have been Mark Dara, but two of them.
Mark Dara
quit.
ran. Yeah,
and it's like, well, so it's not just them replacing leadership. Leadership is also quitting.
Yeah, but Casey Hudson quit after EA forced them to rethink the entire project. Mark Dara quit after EA forced them to rethink the whole project. Why would EA do it if the project is going well? But if EA's higher ups are
the
first
first time,
guys, what do you have? And they show them gameplay, they show them a world.
The first time it was because of the fact that they wanted a live service game. They wanted more live service games. They wanted the live service money. So that's why they were like, okay, guys, we're going to rework this whole thing into becoming a live service bonanza. And then the developers were kind of like, actually, we should make a single player game or this whole thing's going to go to shit. And then EA goes like, oh, okay, I guess we'll do that then. Begrudgingly.
Yeah, well, it doesn't answer, like, so the developers say we should make a single player game. In 2020, EA says, okay, make a single player game. 4 years later, they released the biggest slop in the history of the world.
Because they had to use, they didn't let them fully reset the development cycle, and they had to reuse the multiplayer shit, which is, like I said, it's something that I called out on literally the first gameplay trailer they showed. I was like, this is just multiplayer shit adapted to single player.
It's fine, but where are the zones that they created in the 4 years that they had that wasn't made for the multiplayer? Where are the storylines?
They weren't creating zones.
Should have been able to create.
I mean, I'm going to be speculating.
No, but what did they do for 4 years? Because 4 years, entire games are made in 4 years.
I don't fucking know.
What did they do for 4 years?
They were incompetent,
well, I can
like
tell
they've
you.
always been.
Yeah, there you go. They were incompetent. I agree with you, because they were hired based on a checklist rather than based on merit. Right?
I don't know
now
about
we're
that.
getting to where I don't
know about that.
Dude,
I'm not willing. I'm not willing to
explain the constant failures of the AAA industry,
Like,
because
listen.
it seems to me, right, very convenient that every single time these AAA studios with their political slop fails, there's always someone to blame, right? And it's consistently the blame is placed on people other than the developers. And at no point does anyone go, well, shouldn't the developers at least take some responsibility for these failures? Because they're not even making games that anyone would enjoy, right? And I think it's even more pertinent here. Dragon Age Veilguard, before people even knew how bad the story was, before people even knew how bad the game was, already failed. It didn't have massive sales numbers. It didn't post the first day of 1 million sales, right? And then only did you see massive refunds or massive outcry. It just didn't get off the ground, which should tell you that players weren't excited about the game going into the game. And even if you don't want to say that woke has at least some reason or part to play in the failures of these games.
I didn't say I don't want to say. I said I'm not saying it one way or another, because I need to be able to look at the games objectively without bias.
I'm not talking about you here. I'm talking about Jason Schreier. He's the journalist.
Oh, because of the fact that he didn't talk about
right?
the woke part of the game.
Yeah, he doesn't once mention that, you know what? Even though I might not necessarily agree, it should also be mentioned that a